Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
All right, guys. Hey, happy Friday. And I got a treat for you today. Sometimes you hear on the radio, but now I have a visual of Dr. Christine Steerman, who I want to welcome to the program. Doctor, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's nice to do this intimate type thing, this show here that I can see you and I can see your face and everything. So that's pretty cool. But 40 years, we should have brought a cake. 40 years as a doctor of psychotherapy, you must have seen it all.
Seen a lot. I've seen a lot.
Yeah. And what is it about? Is it the helping people?
I think so. It's very satisfying to, it's like seeing when somebody has an aha and they're like, oh.
Okay.
Yeah. I like that when people feel better and come away with something like that.
Now, your job as the doctor, you don't do you give options? You never give direction. You offer different ways to think about something. Tell me because I don't really know what the science is and why you're so good at it. What is it?
Well, what I try to do is connect with the person at whatever it is that comes through the door, and try not to. I mean, we all have our own assumptions and patterns in our heads and about what we think someone else is like or what they want, but I try to put that aside and listen to what they're saying and understand where they're coming from, and then figure out what they want and then help them see it. Because a lot of times if I say what I think, whether I'm right or wrong, if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, but I can be right at the wrong time.
I see.
And then they're like, no, I don't think so. But it doesn't help. It helps people get it if they figure it out for themselves, and helping them see. Just it's like a lot of Socratic questioning. You know, you just basically ask people questions, like Socrates, right? You ask questions.
Oh, okay.
And help them kind of get to where they need to get. And sometimes I think I know where they need to get, and that's not really where they needed to get. So it's much better if I get out of the way.
So are you saying that they might know somewhere inside them and you're just kind of bringing it out?
Yeah.
So you're like the locksmith.
Maybe.
That's pretty cool.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so sometimes you think, hey, I know what this problem is. I know what you need to do. But then all of a sudden you'll talk more and the person will. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I'm like, oh, sometimes I might guess right and sometimes I don't guess right, and it's not my life. So
I got it. That's pretty cool. It's like me playing the horses almost. Anyway, I'm totally kidding. That was a total joke. It had nothing to do with one of them.
I don't get that metaphor.
Well, it's like sometimes where, I think I'm a genius. I know what horse is going to win. I can tell you why, and I can tell you what surface they need to go on and how much weight they need to, all the specifics. But yet that horse only knows if he or she is going to win, right?
Right. And you don't know what other factors are involved that you have no way of knowing. Right.
Wow. All right. So Christine Steerman, a lot. I'm trying to think of a way to say this, but there is a lot of trauma in the world today, and it's at times it's difficult to digest. But you must see this in your practice with
Sure.
everyone that you work with.
Yeah.
Do you see trauma across the board?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, yes. And sometimes it's a story that I can't even repeat to anybody, because it would traumatize them to hear the story. So it's some things it's just better not repeated.
Even if someone said something that you just you maybe you had that aha moment and said, "Did you hear what you just said?" will you ever say, "Hey, can you say that again?" Or if it's going to be if it's not going to affect them the way in a positive way, will you leave it alone and maybe another day, or how do you deal with something that's a very hard decision to make?
Yes, and when I leave it up to the person whether they want to address something, because it's not good to push somebody to tell something that the telling itself is re-traumatizing.
Oh, I see.
And if they're ready to talk about it, and it's their decision, it's their story, and if they're ready to talk about it, then they're ready to talk about it. But I would never ask somebody to tell me something that they don't want to tell me.
Okay, Doc. Well, what about something that I understand we can black something out? Like something happened maybe to me when I was 10, and maybe I put it away somehow. I had hid it somewhere. Does that happen a lot? And what do you do with that?
It happens. And I think it doesn't happen a super great deal, but it's one of those things that I sort of have to trust their own brain to be ready to address it when they're ready to address it. And because sometimes people come in, they'll say, I think I must have blocked something out, just because they don't feel good and they think there must be something blocked out. I have no way of knowing. And then sometimes people really have blocked something out. But what I was talking about before is sometimes people will tell a story, and if they're telling it, it was traumatic, but they're able to tell it. So it's good for them to be able to tell it, but it's important for me to be able to hear it. But it's also important for me to judge what I can repeat that doesn't damage other people.
Good point. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Because I remember reading and I'm not even going to tell what the story was, but it was just reading something in the newspaper that was, to me, horrific. And not everybody is going to respond the same to every story, but it's one of those things that it was a traumatizing thing for me to picture what I read in the newspaper. So, but we're all different what it is that gets us.
I got you.
Yeah.
And everyone's dealing with trauma. What are some ways that we can deal with it? I mean, what do you think? What do you recommend? Is it talking? Is it going to someone like yourself, or how do we deal with it?
That does help, and being able to find, well, one of the more recent, I get one way of addressing it is trying to find the meaning of the trauma to the person. Like, one way of processing it is, how did it change their lives? So for instance, if somebody say and PTSD started out with, like war things, like veterans coming back with trauma in the field. But say if somebody comes back with a story and of something traumatic that happened to them, or something that they saw, say for instance, they saw somebody get hit by a car and that was very traumatic, and they're telling the story. But most people do process trauma on their own without any help. They kind of get through it. But sometimes when they get stuck, they're unable to process it. It's because of a piece of it can be because of the meaning that was included. For instance, it was my fault that person got hit by a car because I didn't see it, or I didn't yell at them, or I thought maybe that car was too close, but I didn't say something, so it's my fault. So if it has something to do with that, or if it means now because of what I saw, I no longer think it's safe to go outside, or I will not ever drive a car, or I will never let my children be in a car, or something that totally changes your world, your sense of the world, or that, okay, that means people are mean, or people are not safe, or whatever. But that has a lot to do with it. But I was going to tell a couple of interesting things that's happened to me recently, because I've been rethinking trauma a little bit. Like, when does a trauma or a bad thing, when does it turn into PTSD, and when doesn't it? When do you get through it and you're like, wow, that was horrible, but you're not like freaked out emotionally by it? And what stimulated this for me was a Labor Day weekend. I was working in the back, and I have like 3 acres, and I just love working out there. And I had a brush cutter, which is like a big weed whacker.
Okay.
And I didn't realize I had gone over a a yellow jacket nest.
Oh.
And so I weed
Uh-oh.
whacked it, and I had things on, so I didn't hear them. I didn't see them coming. All of a sudden, they were all over me.
Oh no.
And so I was trying to get away, and I was tripping over the thing, and I had to stop, the weed whacker thing, and I had to stop to get the harness off so I could get away. So I had to stand there while they were like,
Oh my God.
and I did finally get away. Obviously, I'm not allergic, obviously.
Thank God.
But I counted like just to where I could see more than 100 stings, and it was a miserable few days. And so there were some funny things that just how I dealt with that.
Funny? I don't know about funny, but
Well, it was.
I'm glad you could look at it like that.
Because the traumatic part of it is I don't have PTSD from it. It was really a horrible experience.
Was it painful?
Oh God, yes.
I would assume it was brutal.
I was on fire everywhere. Like the only place I didn't get stung was maybe my feet and parts of my head.
Oh my God.
And so it was horrible, but it was very painful. And then after that was days of this itching and
no.
The funny part was when I finally did get back to the house. I remember when I was a kid, like in elementary school, I got a bee sting on my hand, and we didn't have a school nurse. So of course I went to the lunch lady because that's the next best thing. And she made a paste of baking soda and water and put it on the bee sting, and it helped.
It helped.
So that's all I was thinking of is like, I need to find my baking soda. So I went in the cabinet. I had a box of it, and I got a plastic basin that I put in the tub, and I poured the whole box in there and put water in there and just kind of put it all over. And it was too watery. It wasn't enough. So then I was like, I need more baking soda. The only thing I could think of was the stuff for the litter box. So it was this big box of baking soda mixed with whatever. And I did all of that and just pasted myself with it all over the place. And for the rest of the day, I smelled like a litter box.
Oh my God! And you must have looked like the person from Ghost. You know that movie?
Yeah, it was, but it was horrible. But it wasn't what I would say traumatic. And an event like that certainly can be traumatic for people. People have had really traumatic by being swarmed by bees or yellow jackets.
Wow.
And so it wasn't for me. And I was trying to figure out, so why wasn't that? Why am I not having to go to therapy for that? And I was talking to another therapist, and he says, well, it's because you took action, like you got yourself out of there. And I'm like, yeah, it would have been a lot worse if I had just, collapsed and then they were just on me, right? That would have been more PTSD kind of a thing. But even so, because I remembered there was an event that happened when I was a kid that I did have PTSD for, which I don't now. It's resolved. But when I was 14, I was attacked by this guy, and I froze initially. I was walking home, and it was a kind of an isolated road, and I was walking home from the school bus, and I was holding on to my books, and I froze so much that when he knocked me down, I was still holding all my books. And he was on top of me, and I wasn't thinking. I was frozen. Yeah. But I thought to myself, you better do something. So I punched him, knocked him right on his keister.
Ah, nice.
And got up and ran up a nearby driveway. And so I got away. But that event was so traumatic.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Even though, and I wasn't even hurt, right? Physically.
But you probably didn't even know you were young. You didn't know what was happening.
I had an idea, right? Okay, because of things he said. But but I didn't really know. And
right.
I just kind of knew. But anyway, I was scared to death, and I was traumatized really badly. And even years later, when I was in training to be a psychologist, I had to interview a young girl who had been sexually assaulted. And I was so traumatized by my near miss that I had what you talked about. I blacked out. I continued the interview, but I forgot it all. Like
you weren't there.
Yeah, I just went away in my mind, and I never did remember what, and I kept talking, but there was no brain working.
Autopilot.
Yeah. And I didn't remember anything about the interview. When I went
Wow.
back to my supervisor, he's like, so what happened? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what happened.
Wow.
I wasn't there, you know? And so what's the difference?
Yeah.
It's like, because I did take action, I got away, I wasn't hurt. And I didn't really see it coming totally. I mean, I kind of suspected something was off with this guy, but at any rate, so I think it's so complicated with people. Like, what is it that makes something traumatic, and it's different for each person. And this thing that happened to me a couple of weeks ago made me realize it's even more complicated than I thought. But one thing that does help, because in therapy and stuff, is when finding ways, and there's different techniques to help people do this without being re-traumatized, but stepping back from the memory, or stepping back, like instead of remembering it in first person, remembering it, playing it like a movie in third person. And it helps to make it less, it helps you don't lose information, but the affect lowers. And so I did try that. And even though the memory of what happened when I was 14 isn't traumatic anymore, if I think of that as if I'm standing over on the other side of the road, watching what's happening and seeing this little girl punch this guy and knock him completely over, I get a real sense of satisfaction.
And that's what's got to be different in this case and the bees, because you were the one, something bad happened to you, but you ultimately took control, and your will was, was number one, even though that should never happen to anybody. But
Mhm.
does that make any sense, that the
Yeah,
fact that
I think
you
that
took
that is a
action?
piece of it. Yeah, yeah, I think that is a piece of it. Although even then, when I was 14, I knew I took action and I got myself out of there, but I was still traumatized.
Yeah, of course. How could you not be?
Well, see, that's what I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. How was I not traumatized by being stung more than 100 times?
Well, because it wasn't a betrayal of. They're not human.
Yeah, that is an excellent thing, because it's a lot worse when it's human caused. You're right.
Because
You're
then you
right.
blame yourself, right? Did I do something wrong? Or these
Well,
bees,
and
if
that's
they
another
attack, but
factor. Yeah. But when something rotten happens and a person did it, and a person did it on purpose, that does tend to increase the trauma level.
yeah, yeah, it's a
Sure.
good point. You're right. Hey, Mr. Producer, you got something you need to say, because I can't read.
Yeah. So we have a ton of instant feedback. We definitely will not be able to get through all of them, but
I, I can see I can see a bunch of pages.
yeah. Um,
I can't pick out one word though.
we have Hunter from New York. They have a really good question. They go, my brother went through a breakup a few years ago and he took it pretty roughly. He spent an entire year in his room and started talking to himself. And although he's better now, he's never quite been the same. Can a breakup cause a psychotic break? And should I stop wishing my brother will return to his old self?
Hmm. That's a sad story.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah.
I hope that kid's all right.
I mean, I think it psychotic breaks, there's so many things that can cause people to react in different ways. I don't know that a breakup would necessarily all by itself cause a psychotic break that
There's
wasn't
something
maybe.
underneath that, right?
Yeah, I mean, that a psychotic break is something really more biological, really. I think. But I've been thinking a lot about, what's the difference between, when we talk about mental illness and emotional pain, right? And I think that a lot of people don't like that whole pejorative of mental illness, and I wish that sometimes we just talk about emotional pain and how that can just knock somebody off. And talking to yourself doesn't necessarily mean you're psychotic either.
But
But
is it, Doc? Is a year of isolation, is that a little much, or
that is a long time to be suffering like that from a breakup, and that person sounds like they need some help. The thing is, you can't make somebody get help if they're not ready. And of course, I would not lose hope that somebody can be back to the way we never completely return after we go through something because it changes us. Doesn't mean that person can't be okay again, but it depends on so many factors. What is going on with that person and how that person puts it together. Did they have a psychotic break, or is it, that they had this breakup and they've decided, screw it, I'm not dealing with women again. I'm not doing anything, they're all whatever. And they have this sort of self-imposed, like almost agoraphobic kind of a response, which is totally treatable. So I think, yes, there's hope, but it depends on what really happened. And you don't know that from the outside. That person would have to go and get some help and try to figure out what exactly happened and what's the meaning of what happened. I mean, that's what's critical to it, is what is the meaning of what happened? Was it that this didn't work out with this person? Is it that I screw up all my relationships? Is it that all women are rotten? What is there something like that that's keeping me stuck?
Gotcha. Doc, if that person wanted to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Well, they could, just.
You do virtual stuff, right?
Send me a message through my email, through the website, and then if I can try to send a message back and maybe give them some suggestions of where they might go for assistance.
Awesome. Mr. Producer, we got time for one more or what?
Yes, we do have time for one more. What do you attribute to the increase in anxiety and depression in today's society? And that came from Catherine from Arkansas.
Well, at least the pandemic has really knocked everybody off. Yes, we blame everything on the pandemic, but the pandemic has isolated people from each other and changed how things are. And I think I've just seen a lot more anxiety and just other stuff just from that.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of other stuff going on, but there always is. There's always stuff going on that can scare you.
Totally. Guys, Dr. Christine Steerman, great guest, great show. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone. Sorry we didn't get to everyone, but Dr. Steerman, can you give us the last word? Can you give us something to think about? And if you want to put out anything where people can get a hold of you, or something you're publishing, or a site, or social media, you got the floor, my friend.
Gosh, well, if people really want to contact me, they can go to christinestearman.com and send me an email through there. I did publish a couple of things that people can look at online, like through Kindle if they want to. Like, one is about cyberbullying and another one is about helping little kids with anxieties. Like, What If I Missed My Bus is the name of it. They can see that there. Other than that, I don't know. I just try not to feel bad if you're suffering, because everybody suffers sometimes, and it doesn't mean you're broken and there's something wrong with you.
Great words. Guys, Dr. Christine Steerman, thank you, doctor. And guys, we'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.